My name is Daphne Sterling. I'm 35 years old, and until this spring, I believe stability wasn't something you stumbled into. It was something you built, carefully, quietly, without leaving cracks that could collapse later. That belief shaped everything: my work, my routines, my relationships, especially my judgment. Or at least, I thought it did. Daniel Carter was 31. We had been together a little over 4 years, engaged for 11 months, living in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a townhouse I bought long before I met him. The mortgage was mine, the keys were mine, the life inside it I thought was ours. From the outside, we made sense. We had rhythm, structure, the kind of relationship people point to when they say, "That's going somewhere." Daniel had a quiet kind of charm. Not loud, not performative, the kind that didn't ask for attention, but still held it when it arrived. In the beginning, that felt easy. Safe. He told me early on that he'd had one serious relationship before me, said it ended badly. Said his ex-wife, Olivia, was difficult, controlling, someone he'd had to fight to get away from. I didn't interrogate that. When someone tells you they escaped something painful, you don't pick at it like a loose thread. You respect the boundary. The only direct thing I ever asked him was simple. "Have you ever been married?" He smiled, soft, reassuring. No, nothing like that. So I believed him. By the time this happened, the wedding was 7 weeks away. Most of it was already paid. The venue deposit, $3,600. Catering, $2,400. Photographer, $1,250. Live strings, $600. A dozen smaller things that added up faster than they should. We had a joint wedding account. I funded most of it, around $18,000 from me, about $6,000 from him. Not because I was keeping score, just because I could. Because I wanted the day handled. That Thursday, I was at the kitchen island finalizing guest counts. The planner needed numbers by 5. My laptop had died, so I used Daniel's. He knew I was using it. He had even texted me earlier, asked me to check the catering spreadsheet while he was out at lunch with a friend. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. An email notification slid across the top of the screen. Reminder, status conference and dissolution matter. Davidson County Chancery Court. I stared at it for a second. Then I clicked. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe some people would call it invasive. I don't care. When you are 7 weeks away from marrying someone and their laptop calmly announces an active court case tied to their name, privacy stops being the priority. Reality does. The email was from a family law office in Nashville. It listed a case number, a hearing date, 8 days away, and the case name. Daniel Carter versus Olivia Carter. Not ex-girlfriend. Not past relationship. Wife. I didn't panic. I didn't call him. I didn't throw anything. I wrote the case number down on a sticky note, opened the county portal, searched it. There it was. Marriage filed in 2021. Separation initiated 8 months ago. Not finalized. Still active. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the screen. Then I opened the wedding account, because suddenly I didn't trust anything. It didn't take long. 3 weeks earlier, $4,200 transferred to a law firm. Same Nashville address. Same one from the email footer. I remember laughing once. Not because it was funny, because it was clear. Painfully, stupidly clear. He wasn't just still married. He had used our wedding money to manage the secret. Daniel came home around 6:20. I heard the door before I saw him. Keys, footsteps, the quiet rhythm I used to associate with comfort. He walked in holding iced coffee and a shopping bag, smiling. Halfway on his phone. "Did you finish the seating chart?" he asked. I looked at him and said, "Who is Olivia?" Everything stopped. He set the bag down slowly. Looked at me. Not confused. Not surprised. Just calculating. I turned the laptop toward him. The email was still open. He closed his eyes for a second. Exhaled. "It's not what you think." I let out a small breath. That sentence has never once made anything better. He rubbed his face. "She's my ex." I shook my head. "She's your wife." He tried the technical route first. Said they'd been separated forever. Said the divorce was basically done. Said the court was just slow. That Olivia had been difficult about a car, about taxes, about everything. Then he pivoted. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd overreact." Those exact words. Something in me settled when he said that. Not escalated. Not exploded. Settled. Because that wasn't panic. That wasn't regret. That was strategy. I looked at him. Am I overreacting to the part where you told me you'd never been married? Or the part where we sent invitations to a wedding you legally can't have? He crossed his arms. Defensive now. Said it would be finalized before the ceremony. Said it wasn't my business until it affected the date. Said I was making it bigger than it was. I asked about the $4,200. He looked away, said he was going to replace it. I asked from where. He said that wasn't the point. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a system. A quiet, controlled, ongoing system. I nodded once. Then keep it without me. He blinked. What? If it's small enough to hide, it's small enough to keep. Just not with me. His expression shifted. Fast. From defensive to soft. He sat down, hands in his hair. I didn't mean it like that. I was embarrassed. I just wanted one clean start with you, without all that mess attached. I studied him. Maybe he believed that. Maybe he didn't. But it didn't matter, because I wasn't the same person listening to him that evening. I'm canceling the wedding. He actually laughed. Don't be dramatic. I picked up my phone and called the venue, right in front of him. Then the caterer. Then the photographer. Then the planner. Deposit lost. Some money gone. Fine. I froze everything else before another $6,000 could disappear the following week. Daphne, stop, he said, voice rising now. We can talk about this tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't make you less married tonight. That shut him up. For a second, I went to the bedroom, took the ring box, locked it in the safe, changed the password on the wedding account, sent myself every financial statement from the last 6 months. When I came back, he was standing in the kitchen, looking at me like I had become someone else. Maybe I had. You need to stay somewhere else for a few days, I said. You can't throw me out. I'm not. I'm telling you, you're not sleeping in my house tonight after lying to me for 4 years. He grabbed his phone, called his friend Marcus from the driveway, crying, loud enough for the neighbors. By the time he left with an overnight bag, my phone had already lit up. Unknown number. Cruel. Heartless. Overreacting? I didn't respond. That night, I slept maybe 4 hours. Not because I was torn, because my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything that suddenly made sense. The way he avoided combining legal documents. The way he insisted everything stayed digital. The way he dodged direct questions and made me feel unreasonable for asking them. By morning, I wasn't sad anymore. I was organized. By morning, I wasn't sad anymore. I was organized. That was always the version of me people underestimated. Not the angry version, not the wounded one. The calm one. The one who stopped talking and started documenting. I called my older sister Paige before work. She answered on the second ring, still sounding half asleep, and immediately asked, "Why are you calling this early?" I said, "Because if I wait until tonight, I might sound emotional instead of clear." That woke her up. I told her everything from the beginning. The email, the court portal, the transfer from the wedding account, the fact that Daniel had looked me in the face more than once over the years and denied ever being married. She was quiet for a few seconds after I finished. Then she said, "Daphne, if you marry him after this, I'm coming to the ceremony just to drag you out of it myself." I almost laughed. Won't be necessary. Good. I sent her screenshots, the court filing, the transfer, the vendor freezes, everything. Paige read them while we were still on the phone. I could hear the little pauses between her breaths, the same way she did when she was angry enough to become careful. Finally, she said, "This isn't just lying. This is infrastructure." That word stayed with me all day. Infrastructure. Because that was exactly what it felt like. Not a reckless confession, not one bad choice. A structure, built quietly, supported in hidden places, maintained over time. I went to work and got through my meetings like nothing had happened. Budget review at 10, vendor check-in at noon, internal planning call at 2:30. I took notes, answered questions, smiled when required. Sometimes the calmest thing you can do is continue moving. The real fallout began 4 days later. Right on schedule, Marcus texted first. His message came in at 8:11 a.m., long and self-righteous, the kind of text people send when they enjoy the performance of being morally offended. "Daphne, Daniel is devastated. He's humiliated, he's barely sleeping, and honestly, this whole thing feels cruel. You took a painful chapter of his past and turned it into a public punishment." I read it twice. Then I replied once. A screenshot of the active court file. A screenshot of the $4,200 transfer to the Nashville law firm. Nothing else. Then I muted him. 23 minutes later, Daniel's cousin Harper sent me a message on Instagram. "Is it true you ended everything over old legal trauma?" That's what I'm hearing, and I'm just shocked by how cold that sounds. Old legal trauma. I stared at that phrase for a second. It almost impressed me. So clean, so polished, so detached from what had actually happened. Not active deception. Not still married. Not using wedding money to manage the lie. Just old legal trauma. Marketable language for ugly behavior. I didn't answer Harper. I was learning quickly that truth only matters to people who want it. That afternoon, Daniel's mother called me. "Linda, I braced myself before answering because I expected a fight, or tears, or some version of maternal loyalty dressed up as fairness. Instead, she sounded tired. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. Daniel told me you canceled the wedding over some technical issue with his divorce, she said. I'm calling because that sentence makes no sense, and I would like the version that does. I leaned back in my office chair and closed my eyes for a second. Then I told her. All of it. The email, the court search, the transfer from the wedding account, the direct lies, the fact that he had told me, clearly, more than once, that he had never been married. While we were still on the phone, I forwarded her the screenshots. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said quietly, "He told us that was finalized over a year ago." I looked out the window at the parking lot below, sunlight flashing across windshields. It wasn't. I can see that. That was the first time someone from Daniel's side stopped defending the performance and looked straight at the facts. Linda also did not know about the $4,200 transfer. That part hit harder. I could hear it in the way her breath changed. She said she had already paid $1,800 toward the rehearsal dinner because Daniel told her everything with Nashville was behind him. Apparently, behind him meant hidden from everyone else. Before we hung up, she said, "I'm not asking you to change your mind. I just needed to know if my son lied to me too." The sadness in that question settled somewhere deep in my chest, because betrayal spreads. It doesn't stay politely contained between two people. It leaks into parents, friends, finances, rooms, future plans. "I'm sorry," I said. She let out a breath that sounded older than she had a right to sound. "So am I." Daniel, meanwhile, had shifted from apology to narrative control. That evening, he posted a black and white story on Instagram. "Some women will punish you for what you survived instead of loving you through it." No names, of course. Just implication. Just bait. Within an hour, 2 women had replied publicly that he deserved softness. One man commented, "Tell your truth." Another wrote, "Not all scars look honest to people who've never been hurt." I read every word with the detached disbelief of someone watching her own life get translated into fiction in real time. He had hidden an active wife, moved our money without telling me, lied for years, and somehow I was the woman punishing him for surviving. I didn't respond. That became my private rule. No correcting theater, no participating in edited versions of reality. That weekend I boxed his things, not in anger, in rows. Shoes in one set of bins, toiletries in another, winter coats folded flat, watches wrapped separately, chargers and cables sealed in labeled bags, framed photos and towels so the glass wouldn't crack, his grooming products, gym bags, the kitchen knife he insisted was better than all the others, the coffee grinder he bought and never cleaned, the little ceramic tray near the door where he dumped coins, receipts, and the illusion that he belonged permanently in my home. I made a spreadsheet of what went where. By then, I trusted documentation more than memory. On Saturday afternoon, while I was packing, my backdoor camera sent an alert. Someone was at the patio entrance. I checked the feed. Daniel. He still had the garage code. He let himself in like he still lived there and stood in the kitchen looking around the room, taking in the stacked bins, the labeled boxes, the visible evidence that I had moved beyond shock and into logistics. Then he started crying. Not private crying, not collapsed in the dark crying, visible crying, measured enough to be seen. There is a difference, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I stayed in the driveway for another 30 seconds watching through the app. He moved slowly from room to room, shoulders rounded, wiping at his face. At one point, he set his phone against the fruit bowl on the counter. That detail lodged in my mind immediately. Phone angled outward, not down. Not forgotten, placed. I didn't go in right away. When I finally opened the front door, he was in the bedroom doorway, red-eyed, arms folded across himself, as if grief had wrapped him there. He looked at me like he expected the sight of his own sadness to soften me. "Daphne," he said, voice breaking in careful places, "I didn't know you were going to do all this." I set my purse down. "What did you think canceling a wedding meant?" He flinched, or performed one. Sometimes with him, I genuinely couldn't tell anymore. I thought maybe after a few days we'd calm down. "We?" He swallowed and looked away. That was another thing he did when he wanted to seem vulnerable. He took his eyes off me like the feeling was too much. "I made a mess," he said. "I know that. But you're acting like everything we had was fake." "No," I said quietly. "I'm acting like the part built on lies was fake." That landed. He went still. Then he did something almost more insulting than the lies themselves. He softened his voice. "You know why I hid it? Because I was ashamed. Because Olivia was the worst part of my life, and I didn't want her shadow all over us. I wanted one thing that was mine, one future that wasn't contaminated by her. The words were good, almost good enough. But that was the problem with Daniel. His lies rarely sounded ridiculous. They sounded curated, emotionally optimized, just plausible enough to make you question your own resistance. I leaned against the dresser and looked at him for a long moment. You didn't hide shame, I said. You hid information I needed in order to decide whether to marry you. His mouth tightened. That was the first flash of irritation underneath the sadness. You make everything sound clinical, better than dishonest. He looked toward the safe drawer, even though the safe itself was concealed behind it. A tiny movement, a reflex. Then his eyes came back to me. So you took the ring too? Yes. His jaw flexed. Wow. That one word carried more accusation than grief. Like I was the one violating something sacred. I didn't explain. I didn't owe him an explanation for securing the ring he had no right to demand back through guilt. He drifted past me into the kitchen again and sat at the island where we had planned guest counts less than a week earlier. For a second, the sight of him there hit me harder than I expected. Not because I missed him, because familiarity can still hurt after trust dies. He pressed his palms together and said, I just don't understand how you could erase us this fast. I looked at the boxes, at the labels in my own handwriting, at the evidence of how quickly love begins to resemble inventory once truth disappears. You think this is fast because you've known the truth longer than I have. Something changed in his face then. Very small. But there, that flicker people get when they realize the conversation is no longer moving in the direction they wanted. He stood up, walked toward the hallway, then back toward me, restless now. You're making me into some kind of manipulative villain. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, I hadn't needed to make him into anything. I had only needed to stop helping him manage the lighting. I'm seeing you clearly, I said. That was when the tears stopped working. His shoulders straightened. His voice cooled. So that's it? That's it. He laughed once, soft and bitter. Unbelievable. No, I said. Actually, what was unbelievable was finding out I almost married someone who was still legally married to somebody else. For a second, he just stared at me. Then he grabbed 3 pairs of shoes, his toiletry bag, and the wedding binder from the counter. The binder. Of all things. The color-coded tabs, the vendor contacts, the seating drafts, the tiny machine of a future I had spent months helping build. He tucked it under his arm, like possession itself was a statement. Then he walked out. By the time I checked the cameras later, I also noticed 2 decorative baskets missing from the mudroom. Baskets he had once said were ugly. Emotional looting. Petty enough to be absurd. Intentional enough to mean something. I changed the garage code that night, called a locksmith the next morning, and had the front locks rekeyed for $240. Worth every cent. The sound of the new lock turning in the door gave me a strange, sharp kind of relief. Not happiness, not triumph. Just definition. Monday morning, I met with an attorney named Wes for a consultation. $600. Also worth every cent. He was local, dry, efficient, and had the kind of voice that suggested very little in life still surprised him. I told him the short version. Former fiancé still legally married, wedding canceled, ring secured, shared funds partially misused, property removal in progress, increasing emotional volatility. He listened without interrupting, then folded his hands and said, First, keep the ring receipt, and keep the ring locked up. In North Carolina, engagement rings are usually considered conditional gifts tied to marriage. I nodded. Second, he said, stop communicating like a hurt partner and start communicating like someone who may need a judge later. That sentence rearranged something in me, not because it was harsh, because it was clarifying. So I did exactly that. I rented a climate-controlled storage unit for $178 a month, prepaid 2 months, and moved the rest of Daniel's belongings there by Wednesday. I photographed each box before sealing it. I created an inventory list. I emailed him the unit number, gate hours, access instructions, and a clear sentence at the bottom. You have 60 days to retrieve your property. After that, I am no longer responsible for it. He replied 4 times in 11 minutes. You are unbelievable. This is financial abuse. You're punishing me because you can't handle complexity. You always wanted a perfect man with no history. That last one almost would have hurt, if he hadn't literally hidden an active wife. Work, on the other hand, became easier. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I slept better. I got through a software rollout that had been dragging for months, and my director told me I seemed more focused than I had in a year. Funny what clarity does to a nervous system. The quiet almost started to feel real. Almost. Because with Daniel, silence never meant peace. It usually meant he was planning a new angle. The quiet didn't last. It never does when someone loses control of a story they've been managing for years. It was 3 weeks later, Wednesday night, 1:14 a.m., when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I was half asleep, the room dark except for the faint glow of the alarm clock on my nightstand. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Then I saw the message preview. "I think Olivia might be pregnant. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, not shocked, not even confused, just tired, because timing tells its own story. And this message arrived the same day his last attempt at playing the victim online had quietly failed. No sympathy surge, no supportive comments, no traction. So now, this. Pregnancy. Urgency. Emotional leverage. I didn't call. Didn't react the way he wanted. I typed back, slowly, deliberately. "If that's true, email me the doctor's information tomorrow." Then I put my phone down and went back to sleep. No spiraling, no midnight conversations, no emotional negotiations. Just process. At 9:30 the next morning, Linda called. Her voice carried something new this time. Embarrassment. "I'm not excusing this," she said quickly, "but she's not pregnant. She took a test after she texted you. It was negative. She's not thinking clearly." I closed my office door and leaned against it for a second. There it was. Confirmation. Not of chaos. Of pattern. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She exhaled, like she'd been holding that information longer than she wanted to. "I'm sorry, Daphne." "I know." We hung up. No dramatic speech, no victory, no relief. Just another piece of evidence quietly sliding into place. Another confirmation that this wasn't someone unraveling. It was someone escalating. 2 days later, the escalation became official. At 2:17 p.m., while I was reviewing a deployment schedule, my receptionist called me. "Daphne," she said carefully, "there are 2 police officers here asking for you." I paused, not panicked, just aligned. "Send them to the conference room," I said. I already knew why they were there. When I walked in, both officers stood as a courtesy. One older, one younger, neutral expressions, professional distance. "Miss Sterling," the older one said, "we received a report that you may be withholding personal property belonging to Mr. Daniel Carter." There it was. I gestured toward the table. "Please sit." I didn't rush, didn't defend, didn't argue. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had started building the day Wes told me to stop acting like a partner and start acting like a witness. Then I opened it. Inside, order. Printed inventory lists. Photos of every box. The storage unit contract. Screenshots of the email I sent Daniel with full access instructions. Time-stamped images of his passport placed inside a labeled travel pouch. A separate envelope containing copies of every communication where he acknowledged receiving that information. I slid the documents across the table. "Everything he owns is in a climate-controlled storage unit," I said calmly. "He has full access. Here are the details." The younger officer flipped through the pages first, eyes scanning quickly, then slowing as the structure became clear. The older one followed, more methodical. A few minutes passed. Then he nodded once. "This appears to be a civil matter," he said. "Not theft." I met his gaze. "That seems to be a pattern." He almost smiled at that. They thanked me, left the documents exactly where I had placed them, and walked out without another question. I waited until the door closed before I exhaled. Not from stress, from confirmation. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was prepared. I emailed Wes immediately after. Short, direct, attached the report details. His reply came back 20 minutes later. "Good documentation. Keep everything. Do not engage emotionally." I didn't. That afternoon, Daniel escalated again. Not through messages, not through third parties. Directly. At 4:05 p.m., my receptionist called again. "Daphne, there's someone here. He says he's your fiancé." I closed my eyes for a second. Of course he did. Not ex. Not former. Not ended. Fiancé. Language matters when you're trying to control perception. "Did you send him up?" I asked. "No, I wanted to check first." Good, I'll come down." I didn't want him on the 3rd floor. Didn't want him near my team. Didn't want him near anything I had built outside of him. When I stepped into the lobby, he was already there, standing near the reception desk, composed, calm, wearing neutral clothes, clean lines, no visible distress. It took me less than a second to understand what he was doing. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to perform. For the receptionist, for anyone watching, for the narrative. He turned when he saw me, and his expression softened immediately. Perfect timing. "Daphne," he said quietly, stepping closer, but not too close. Measured distance. "I just want to talk." I kept my voice even. "This isn't the place." "I know," he said quickly. Can we go somewhere private? Parking deck? 5 minutes." He lowered his voice further. I'm drowning right now. There it was again. Not apology. Not accountability. Positioning. Victim language wrapped in urgency. I studied him for a moment. The exhaustion in his eyes. The controlled tone. The careful absence of anger. Then I asked one question. Did you ever plan to tell me before the wedding? He froze. Just for a second. But long enough. Then his gaze shifted away. I was trying to fix it first. I nodded slowly. That's what people say when they want credit for secrets they didn't solve. His jaw tightened. A flicker of irritation slipped through the performance, then disappeared. Daphne, please, he said, softer now. We had something real. You know that. Yes, I said. And you built part of it on something that wasn't. Security arrived before he could respond. Not aggressive, just present. He looked at them, then back at me. For a moment, I thought he might escalate, raise his voice, push, create a scene. Instead, he did something worse. He stayed calm, gave me one long look, then said quietly, I hope this was worth it, and walked out. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because it hurt, because of what it revealed. To him, this wasn't about truth. It was about cost, about whether exposing him was worth the damage to his image. That evening, Wes sent the cease and desist letter, $525. It outlined everything clearly. No direct contact, no workplace visits, no interference with property or finances, no third-party harassment, no false claims. Formal boundaries, legal language, structure against chaos. And still, Daniel didn't stop. On Friday, my photographer called me. Hey, quick question, she said. Did you change banks for the refund? I frowned. No, why? There was a pause. Because I got an email from you. Well, I thought it was you, saying you and Daniel had reconciled and wanted the refund sent to a different Zelle account. Something cold settled in my chest. Can you forward me that email? Already did. I opened it as soon as we hung up. Same name. Same signature. One letter off in the email address. Just enough to pass at a glance. Not enough to hold up under attention. I read it twice. Then a third time. Not shocked. Not surprised. Just done. That was the moment everything shifted fully into place. This wasn't emotional instability. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't grief. It was intent. I forwarded the email to Wes, sent the photographer my ID, the original cancellation confirmation, and a short note clarifying that all refunds should go through me only. Within an hour, the situation was contained. The refund went where it was supposed to. Daniel got nothing. But something else changed. Something internal. Until that moment, part of me had still been processing him as someone who lied. After that, I started processing him as someone dangerous. And once you see someone that way, you stop hoping they'll calm down. You start preparing for what they might do next. Once you understand someone isn't just dishonest, but willing to act on that dishonesty, you stop expecting resolution. You start expecting escalation. By the fourth week, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was anticipating. Wes had already sent the cease and desist. The storage unit was documented. The refund attempt had been shut down. The police visit had gone nowhere. From the outside, it should have ended there. But people like Daniel don't end things when they lose. They pivot. The first sign came through my voicemail. 3 messages, all left within the same hour. I listened to them sitting at my desk, door closed, blinds half drawn. The first one sounded like the version of him I had once trusted. Soft, regretful, careful with his words. Daphne, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I just need you to know I'm sorry. Not for everything. I know you think I am, but for how it all came out. I didn't want to hurt you like that. I let the message play to the end. No interruption, no reaction. The second voicemail came immediately after. The tone had shifted. Not louder, sharper. You're making this into something it's not. People go through complicated divorces all the time. You didn't even give me a chance to explain everything properly. There it was. Minimization. Reframing. A subtle push to reposition himself as misunderstood instead of deceptive. Then the third voicemail. That was the one that mattered. No softness. No restraint. I hope he's worth it, Daphne. I really do. Because the way you handled this, the way you humiliated me, I hope whoever you're seeing now makes up for that. I replayed that one twice. Not because it hurt, because it clarified. Everything with Daniel had always come back to one thing. Not truth, not remorse. Image, humiliation, how things looked. Not what they were. That voicemail went straight into the folder. Labeled, time-stamped, saved. Because by then, I had already made the decision. I wasn't just going to contain this. Legally. The paperwork for the no-contact order took less than an hour to assemble. Every piece of communication. The fake refund email. the police report number, the storage unit documentation, the voicemail transcripts, the office lobby incident summary from building security, the original court notice that started everything. It felt almost clinical, like assembling a case study instead of closing a relationship. But that's what it had become. Not love, not grief. Evidence. I filed it that Friday. 1 year no contact order. Home. Workplace. Digital communication. Third-party interference. Everything covered. Wes reviewed it before submission. Clean, he said simply. That word again. Clean. Funny how the thing Daniel said he wanted, a clean start, ended up being what I created without him. While that process moved forward, something unexpected happened. My life steadied. Not dramatically. Not in some cinematic, healed-all-at-once way. Just quietly. At work, I finished the product rollout that had been dragging for months. The system went live without errors. The team actually applauded in the conference room, half joking, half relieved. My director pulled me aside afterward. "You've been different lately," she said. "More focused." I almost laughed. The only thing I had changed was removing a constant source of distortion. Turns out, clarity frees up more energy than motivation ever could. Around that same time, I started having dinner once a week with someone new, Ethan. We met through Paige's husband at a backyard cookout months earlier. At the time, it had been nothing, just polite conversation over grilled food and cheap wine. Now, it was different. Not intense, not strategic, just easy. The first dinner was tacos downtown, loud restaurant, casual, no expectations. The second was coffee after work. The third, I noticed something I hadn't felt in a long time. There was no calculation, no second-guessing what he meant versus what he said. No sense that I was stepping carefully around hidden gaps in the story. He answered questions directly. And when he didn't know something, he said that too. It shouldn't have felt rare. But it did. We didn't define anything. Didn't rush. Didn't perform it online. Just continued. Naturally. Of course, Daniel found out. Not from me. From the same network that had carried his version of events so efficiently in the beginning. His response came exactly how I expected. 3 voicemails. One evening. Same pattern. The first, hurt. The second, accusatory. The third, centered entirely on humiliation. "I hope she's worth what you did to me." That line again. Not what he did. Not what he hid. What I did to him. That was when the decision became final in a way that didn't require emotion. I wasn't dealing with someone who misunderstood the situation. I was dealing with someone who fundamentally refused to acknowledge it. The hearing was scheduled 5 weeks after filing. I didn't count down the days. I just kept moving. Work. Gym. Dinners with Ethan. Quiet weekends where my house finally felt like mine again. No tension in the air. No second layer to every conversation. No sense that something unseen was holding everything in place. Just space. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before my alarm. Not anxious. Just alert. Like my body understood something important was about to close. I dressed simply. Neutral tones, structured lines, nothing that felt like performance. Wes met me outside the courthouse. He carried a binder, thick enough to speak before he did. "You ready?" he asked. Yes. We walked in together. Daniel was already there. Of course he was. Standing near the far wall, dressed carefully. Clean shirt, neutral colors, composed posture. He looked reasonable. That was the word. Reasonable. Like someone who could walk into a situation and convince a stranger he had been misunderstood. For a brief second, I saw him the way I used to. Then I remembered the email, the transfer, the lies, the refund attempt, the voicemails, and the image dissolved. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't frantic. He was prepared, in his own way. But there was one detail that mattered. He was alone. No attorney. Just posture. Wes leaned slightly toward me. "That helps," he murmured. It did. Because performance only carries so far without structure behind it. When we were called in, everything narrowed. The room. The judge. The quiet. The moment where narrative stops being social and starts being formal. Daniel spoke first. Calm. Measured. He framed everything as a misunderstanding. Said I had reacted impulsively to an old legal issue he was already handling. Said he had only tried to resolve shared finances and personal property. Said he had reached out because he believed the relationship deserved closure. Closure. That word again. Always positioned like something noble. Something he was offering. Wes didn't interrupt. He let Daniel finish. Then he stood, opened the binder, and handed the packet to the judge. No speeches. No dramatics. Just documentation. The judge read in silence for several minutes, flipping pages, pausing, continuing. Then he looked up and asked Daniel one question. "Did you tell Miss Sterling you had never been married? Daniel hesitated, just slightly. I don't believe I used those exact words. Wes slid a printed screenshot across the table. A message from years earlier. My question. Clear. Direct. So, no previous marriage baggage, right? Daniel's response. None, I promise. The judge looked at it, then back at him. That seems fairly exact. The air in the room shifted. Subtle. But final. Then came the refund email. The voicemail transcript. The police report. Each piece laid out cleanly. Without emotion. Without exaggeration. Just fact. And fact, when presented properly, doesn't need reinforcement. It stands on its own. Daniel tried to explain. Tried to soften. Tried to reposition. But without controls of the narrative, his words sounded smaller. Less convincing. Less complete. By the time the judge finished reviewing everything, the outcome was already clear. He granted the no contact order. 1 year, no direct or indirect communication, no workplace visits, no home visits, no third-party interference. Then he said something that stayed with me. Closure is not something you impose on another person after repeated deception and unwanted contact. Daniel didn't respond. For once, he had nothing to reposition. And just like that, it was over. And just like that, it was over. Not in the way people imagine endings. No dramatic silence. No final glance heavy with unresolved emotion. Just a quiet shift. A line drawn by someone who had nothing to gain from either of us except clarity. Daniel stood there for a second after the judge finished speaking, like he was waiting for something else to happen. Some reversal, some correction, some moment where the room would tilt back in his favor. It didn't. He nodded once, tight and controlled, then turned and walked out without looking at me. No apology, no last attempt, no performance, just absence. Wes closed the binder beside me. That's done, he said. I nodded, not relieved, not triumphant, just finished. We stepped out into the hallway, the courthouse air cooler than it should have been, fluorescent lights flattening everything into something neutral and procedural. And that's when I saw Linda. She was standing near the far wall, hands clasped together, posture slightly smaller than I remembered. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me, slowly, carefully, like she wasn't sure what version of me she would meet. I didn't want to come in, she said quietly. I didn't think it was my place. I understood that. It wasn't her conflict. But it had still touched her life. She held out an envelope. I know this doesn't fix anything, she said, but it's what I could get back. I took it. Inside, a cashier's check. $2,500. Not everything, but not nothing either. You didn't have to do this, I said. She gave a small, tired smile. I know, but sometimes doing something small is the only way to stand next to something big. That sentence settled deeper than I expected. Not because of the money, because of what it acknowledged. The weight of what had happened. The fact that it mattered. She looked at me for a moment longer, then said the one thing that stayed with me, long after everything else faded. You didn't leave because he had a past, she said. You left because he built your future on a lie. I didn't respond right away, because there wasn't anything to correct. That was exactly it. Not the marriage alone, not the court date, not even the money. The lie. The structure of it. The way it removed my ability to choose with full information. I'm sorry, she added. I nodded once. So am I. We stood there for another second, then she stepped back. No hug, no extended goodbye. Just a quiet understanding that whatever connection had existed between us was tied to something that no longer existed. And then she walked away. Over the next few weeks, everything else resolved itself the way things usually do once the core is removed. Quietly, without ceremony. Daniel's divorce from Olivia was finalized in Tennessee. He left Raleigh not long after. I heard, through the same network that once carried his version of events, that he moved back to Nashville to stay with an aunt. 2 of the groomsmen reached out to me privately. Short messages. Apologies. Not elaborate. Not performative. Just acknowledgement. The refunds from the vendors came through as expected. Not all of it, but enough to close the account cleanly. I sold the ring back to the jeweler. $5,800. Less than what it cost. More than what it meant by then. I used part of that money to replace the guest room furniture. Turned it into something else. A desk. A reading chair. A space that felt like mine again. No leftover shape of someone who didn't belong there. Ethan and I kept seeing each other. Slowly. No declarations. No rush labels. Just consistency. Dinners that didn't require interpretation. Conversations that didn't have second layers. Silence that didn't feel like something was being hidden inside it. At work, I stepped fully into the new role. More responsibility. Better pay. Less friction. It turns out when you're not spending emotional energy trying to reconcile contradictions, you get a lot more done. But the part that stayed with me wasn't the logistics, not the money, not the legal outcome. It was the timing. 7 weeks. That's how close I had been. 7 weeks from standing in a dress, smiling for photos, legally binding myself to someone who was already legally bound to someone else. 7 weeks from building a life on top of something unfinished. If that email had come a month later, if I hadn't used his laptop that day, if I had trusted the version of reality he curated just a little longer, I might have walked into that ceremony without knowing the truth. And that's the part people misunderstand when they talk about secrets. They say everyone has them. They say privacy matters. They say the past doesn't define you. And all of that is true, until the secret changes someone else's ability to choose. Because that's the line. A private thought? Yours. An embarrassing story? Yours. A past mistake you're still processing? Yours. But a legal marriage you hide while asking someone else to marry you? That's not privacy. That's manipulation. That's removing informed consent and replacing it with a controlled version of reality. Daniel said I overreacted. I don't think I did. If anything,